Chile. This country occupies a long, narrow strip of land between the Andes to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. It stretches over 2,670 miles north to south, but only 217 miles at its widest point, east to west. Its population was 17.5 million in 2017. The capital and largest city is Santiago, and the national language is Spanish. Chile's a high-income economy with high living standards. It's among South America's most economically and socially stable and prosperous nations. It also ranks high in sustainability and democratic development. Currently, it also has the lowest homicide rate in the Americas after Canada. After arriving, we checked into the hotel and took an Uber to the so-called Craft Mall. We immediately noticed some evidence of smog accumulation and learned that Santiago is a city in a bowl similar to Los Angeles where smog can be accumulated. It's circled by mountains. We also learned that a week or so earlier, the city had a severe smoke problem with smoke from the Australian bushfires. Anyway, the Craft Mall was a real tourist milking exercise. They had lots of nice, expensive, well-displayed local crafts, but not the sort of street bargains we usually look for. Saw some unique-looking batik artwork, which, as a textile dyer, fascinated me in particular. Then we found the best souvenir of all, Cerveja Austral, a great local lager, which we drank as we relaxed. Then we returned to the hotel and had dinner. In the morning we did the city tour. We drove through downtown and saw the Central Post Office, soon to be overtaken by the jungle. Then we visited the Santiago Metropolitan Cathedral, constructed in 1753 to 1799. The two towers were added a century later. Next was La Moneda, Presidential Palace. Inaugurated in 1805, it was used as the mint until the president moved in 1846 and remained until 1958. It's now a national monument. It was surrounded by fencing when we saw it due to the potential rioting damaging it. The riots started over an increase of 4% in subway fares, but soon morphed into a collection of social inequities, rising living costs, and the worst rates of inequity in Latin America. The increase was scrapped and the government raised the minimum wage. Still the rioting continued, but by the radical criminal and terror folks, who wanted nothing but anarchy with the police. We were advised to avoid the central city, where the rioting was still taking place every evening. It was depressing to see the damage that was being done by what we were assured was simply the criminal element. They were only demonstrating to bring out the police, who felt obliged to come out to protect the property. Catch-22. If the police were not there, they probably wouldn't be there either. We also visited the bohemian area called Bella Vista and spent time wandering around the touristy, colourful and humorous streets, full of music and exotic tango dances. Later on in the trip, we drove up the San Cristobal Hill and saw some spectacular views of the city. Later in the afternoon, we walked down to the Costanera Center. This is a business and commercial complex with a 6-floor shopping mall, 2 high-end hotels and an office building. The Torre Costanera, at 330 metres, is the tallest building in the Southern Hemisphere after Australia's Q1 on the Gold Coast at 322 metres. It was Valentine's Day and we rode the elevator to the top lookout, where various displays enabled us to remember this date with our friends. The views from the top were quite spectacular. In typical Gate 1 fashion, we were awakened at 3 a.m. and left for the airport at 4:30. We flew out for Punta Arenas. Once we arrived, we made the long drive to Puerto Natales. The drive illustrated just how difficult it was for anything other than tough grasses to grow. The trees struggled against Spanish moss destruction and rarely grew more than 6 foot tall. The land was windswept and austere. We saw a flock of flamingos, but the wind was so bad that holding a camera still was impossible. We stopped off along the way at an old sheep farm for a fine meal of barbecued lamb. We saw a sheep shearing exhibition and a collection of ancient farming equipment related to shearing and wool handling. I found this very interesting, being a textile man. We also visited an old homestead, furnished exactly as it was 100 years ago. We then hit the road again for Puerto Natales, staying at a beautiful hotel, Costrales, overlooking the lake. Puerto Natales is the only city in the southernmost Chile and is the jumping-off point for travellers to Torres del Paine. It's so windy the locals made a statue of two people being blown away, holding onto posts. Back on the bus and off to Torres del Paine. We drove around the park and saw some waterfalls and the local guanacos, also signs of the damage from the bushfires. We were told that the particular trees and conditions in the park mean the trees can take up to 500 years to grow full size. This means that bushfire can be disastrous. In 1985, a tourist started a fire that burned about 58 square miles of the park. In February 2005, an accidental fire started by a Czech backpacker, which lasted for about 10 days, destroyed 60 square miles of the park, including about 2 square kilometres of native forest. The Czech government offered aid after the fire and donated $1 million to reforestation efforts. In late December 2011 through January 2012, an Israeli backpacker was found guilty to have started a fire after being caught by a park ranger when lighting up some paper roll in a forbidden area. This burned about 68 square miles of the reserve. The Israeli government sent reforestation experts to the zone and has committed to donate trees to replant the affected areas. After 20 years, the trees are still only about 12 inches high. That night, we checked into the Hotel Rio Serrano. When we awoke the next morning, we were blown away by the magnificent sunrise over the Horns and the mountains. The next morning, we were scheduled to visit Grey Glacier, but the wind was too strong, so we did the hike of the Torres del Paine. Susie was smart enough to relax in the pool and spa at the hotel. I wasn't. Torres del Paine National Park in Chile's Patagonia region is known for its soaring mountains, bright blue icebergs that cleave from glaciers, and golden pampas grasslands that shelter rare wildlife, such as llama-like guanacos. Some of its most iconic sites are the 3 granite towers from which the park takes its name, and the horn-shaped peaks called Cuernos del Paine. We hiked for several hours up into Torres del Paine as we got closer and closer to the magnificent formation known as the Horns, or Cuernos del Paine. They were absolutely stunning, and no amount of photography can capture the power they exuded. We were also nearly blown away by the wind and cold. It was layer weather, no doubt. Then we went to the hotel where the trip to Grey Glacier begins. The wind was acceptable according to legal terms, which means it was a bloody tornado. It wouldn't have been so bad, except we had to hike about half an hour, cross a swinging bridge, traverse about 100 to 200 feet of open sand while being blasted by 40-mile-an-hour freezing winds. Then we had to gather and wait to climb aboard the boat, which took us out to the glacier. After killing about an hour sailing around icebergs which had calved previously, the saving grace was that alcohol was available on the boat. Grey Glacier was nice, but the investment of energy was dubious. Today we drove to El Calafate in Argentina, gateway to Los Glaciers National Park and the Moreno Glacier. Pretty much of the day was driving, and of course we entered Argentina. Today we did the boat trip around the Glaciers National Park, bobbing around the ice floes until we reached the Uppsala Glacier. El Calafate is a humming tourist spot, so we did the ice bar thing. Bloody deadly, well below freezing. You get 20 minutes in an ice cave with all the shots you can drink. Since you can barely stand up without being drunk, it's not going to be long before you have a serious back injury. Most people did what we did. Take bloody selfies and get out. Today we visited the Moreno Glacier in Los Glaciers National Park. This park is the largest ice cap outside Antarctica and Greenland and contains the world's third largest reserve of fresh water. The glacier ice wall is almost 3 miles wide and over 240 foot above the lake's surface. There is a cliffside promenade almost right up against the glacier at one point, where we watched and listened to ice as it calved and broke away into the lake. The easy access of this site has crowned Perito Moreno Glacier as one of the most visited glaciers in the world. Today we flew to Buenos Aires. On arrival before our luggage could be unloaded, the baggage handlers went on strike. We and hundreds of others were stranded in the airport as no flights could leave and none unload luggage for about 2 hours until the handlers negotiated a new deal. I wanted to raise an insurrection, but Susie frowned at me. I wanted to see if 1,000 irate flyers could slow clap the ceiling tiles loose. Luckily, a team of soccer players began a slow clap, and I happily joined in, but the crowd soon lapsed without a natural leader to egg them on. I missed my chance at creating an airport happening. I did record part of the insurrection, which you can hear now, or in the background. We eventually made it to our hotel. Buenos Aires is a thoroughly beautiful city. Called the Paris of South America, we may have just arrived at a perfect time. The main thoroughfare was lined with hundreds of blossoming trees, and the main street was the widest in any country except one in China. It took almost 5 minutes to cross the road. It was beautiful, clean, and vibrant. We went out and ordered an Argentine beef special meal, which was tough as leather. Oh well. Today we did a complete Buenos Aires city tour, taking in the Metropolitan Cathedral, where the honor guard protects the remains of General San Martin, the Frenchman who liberated Argentina, Chile, and Peru. Then on to Casa Rosada, the government palace, where Eva and Juan Perón gave their famous speeches. We saw Floralis Generica, a huge blossom made of aluminum, which used to open at sunrise and close at sunset. Hasn't been working for a few years, though, now. We went to the colourful La Boca neighbourhood and enjoyed the vibrance and colour, the life. There were many opportunities for unique touristy photo ops. Argentinians are very proud that the current Pope rose from the slums of Buenos Aires. Then we went on to the Recoleta Cemetery, containing over 4 city blocks of handcrafted mausoleums, including the tomb of Eva Perón. In the afternoon, we did our own tour of the graffiti district with a great guide, and then we made our own graffiti. It was fascinating to understand the nature of the various types of graffiti and the part they play in the expression of the people and artists about society in general. There are apparently 3 types of graffiti. One is the stylized lettering that's commonly known as tags. Then there's printed on paper graffiti, where the material is first printed on paper and then glued to the surface. The third is the mural graffiti, where a complete picture is painted, expressing some sort of message. Some can be concerning social change, and others can be humorous. We saw numerous small printed graffiti of symbols urging decriminalization of abortion, and other comedic ones, which spread wildly like a Facebook post going viral. One simply stated, "I don't wash," or something to that effect. The area is so well known for its artistic graffiti that many more stores are commissioning graffiti painters to display their work. It was really fun, and we were with a family group who had a young daughter whose knowledge was mind-blowing. You have to only look at the picture of the family to see that they are absolutely bubbling with life. Today we declined the optional Gaucho Ranch experience and opted instead to visit the open street local craft market, which occurred every Sunday. Now at this point, I'm going to continue to show you pictures of the opera house that we visited and then the market, because I've got a story to tell but not a lot of pictures to go with it. We decided that we'd try and do a tour of the opera house just over the street at about 9 o'clock. We were running a bit late, so we rushed over there, missed the 9 o'clock tour and signed up for the 10 o'clock. So we had an hour to fill in, and we wandered in a nearby park, which was practically deserted at this time on a Sunday morning. The park was empty, but for some people walking dogs here and there. We strolled along under some overhanging trees, and Susie suddenly cried out that something had dropped on her face. It looked like a bird dropping. Just as it happened, an old man appeared with a box of tissues and offered one to Susie, which she accepted and wiped the goo from her face. Then the man turned to me and pointed to more white goo running down my pants. He wiped it off, but then more appeared. Now, bells should have been going off wildly here, but I was attempting to understand how any small animal in a tree could projectile shit that much material in such a short time. Suddenly I realised I'd left my wallet in my back pocket since we'd been in a hurry to try and make the 9 o'clock tour. Yes, it was still there. I ran the guy off, but something was prompting me to check my wallet again. I pulled it out and found that all the US bills, $200 worth, had been removed. Nothing else. That means that with a tissue in one hand, squirting goo in the other, he managed to remove the wallet, remove the bills, return the wallet, and continue with his charade. Truly an act worthy of $200. There was no one else around. I'm sure of that. Anyway, we did the opera house tour, and I replaced my pants. Then we went to the Sunday street market. The marketplace was a great collection of unique Argentine souvenirs. Almost everyone was selling jewelry made from the pink stone called rhodochrosite, or Inca rose, that's the national stone of Argentina. Anyway, we returned back to the hotel for a night for the farewell dinner with our guide and our fellow travelers. We weren't leaving for the airport until late afternoon, so we slept in and decided to walk to the bookstore in the old opera house that we've been told about.
Because Grand Splendid used to be a theater, and now it's been turned into a bookshop. So it's the biggest bookshop in South America. So you enter a theater and it's full of books. They don't have many books in English, but it's nice to take some pictures there. And there is a small cafe.
And our taxi took us to the airport, where we travelled home, just squeaking in before the coronavirus broke loose in the US and Argentina and shut everything down.